Welcome to Unlearn, the podcast that redefines the playbook for modern business leaders.
In a world where yesterday's truths are today's challenges, every episode brings you bold ideas and visionary strategies to thrive in a world where the only constant is change.
Let's dive in. Welcome to Unlearn. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the amazing Unlearn podcast where, as usual, I'm your amazing host and we have an amazing co-host as well. Just kidding. This joke is going to get old pretty soon now. I'll stop after this podcast, not to worry. But today I'm excited because on this podcast, as we are now focusing on business leaders understanding how to build modern businesses through partnerships, we have our very first Chief Product Officer. So I'll let her introduce herself, and then we're looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me here. Hi, everybody. My name is Elena Leonova. I'm a Chief Product Officer at a company called Spryker. We're a digital commerce platform for large enterprises. And obviously, ecosystem of us being a platform product is absolutely critical for us, as well as partnerships that we form as part of it. So excited to be on this podcast. A great honor and a pleasure, and happy to share some of the things that brought me to this point and how we're actually thinking about partnerships as well.
Super. Just fun fact, like for the audience, the very first, I would say, proper blog that we did on like partner success was actually by your team, and I think it's Andreas, if I don't get it if I get it correctly, right? Both guys are in Germany, I believe, and they were super excited to kind of share with us this like diagram that built, and we're like, we have this like really strong partner success motion. So first, like, let's kick the conversation off with like, tell us about the state of partnerships at Spryker and the different like teams that are involved, and then let's kick it off there, and then let's after that dive into like, how should product leaders think about partners, and how can we make it easy for the product managers that like front line to include partners in their planning processes?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So when we think about, I'll be kind of like referring to Spryker, but also platform products in general. So to make it a little bit more applicable to everybody who's going to be listening to us.
Yep.
So when we think about platform products, especially the ones that have like a developer component to it, where like somebody is going to be developing on top of it. So Spryker is an example of it. I know you can think of Apple with their iOS platform as an example of that. I know, and there's like Stripe and Shopify and others kind of have a similar concept. So when you think about that, there's always kind of a platform in itself that is a product that is being offered to customers. And then on top of it, then you have your technology partners who complement kind of everything that you have in the product. So it doesn't make sense for platform to do everything. And that is a typical motion that people think about. However, in product management, people don't typically think about kind of build by partner, especially kind of what are the capabilities that you want to leave for your partner to fulfill in kind of like in that full motion. And I'll double down on that later on. But kind of like when you think about the platform, so then you have your technology partners, then you have your solution integrators, solution partners, and sometimes you will actually have like some other agencies that are going to be also your partners, that are going to be advocating for your product. And kind of all of that is really important to be managed by the company, like us, for our company, for example, where we have the partner managers who are responsible for building relationships with partners of any kind, for managing success, for helping those partners understand our platform much better, so then they can actually develop the skill set that is needed in order to build on top of it. Because I know the easier it is for them to understand how to extend our platform, the more success we're mutually going to have. So that's why we have all of those different teams that are focusing specifically on partners to make that partnership successful.
And Elena, do you have program teams that are focused on that experience as well? So kind of unifying the partner managers and your product teams, like what does that interface look like in terms of the programs, the support that you provide as a platform to the partners to incentivize them to build and then to help them actually build well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question. And that's something that most of the time product people don't think about, but I think it's part of the product experience as well. So how we're actually so how we're doing that at Spryker, but also how ideally it should be structured. So there is a platform product. We have the teams that are focused on developer experience to make a developer experience of any partner who builds on top of our platform easier. But developer experience is tailored basically to the developer roles of the partner. Then there's a business relationship as well, because kind of both of those sides are equally important. So then we also have partner success managers. We have the partner managers who are engaging with the partners to make sure that kind of there's a mutual business cases that are happening. We also have partner marketing managers that are also doing a lot of like go-to-market activities together with partner. So basically have those three sides, kind of somebody who's managing the partners from the business perspective, somebody who's managing the partner from a developer-centric perspective, as well as a go-to-market perspective. And all of those people then come back to also the product team, where we need to understand how we can support that. So in some cases, we no, actually not in some cases, many times, and often we actually share our product roadmap openly with our partners to tell them what are we planning to do, what we're not planning to do, what are the areas that we're intentionally leaving for them to complement, how we're enabling them to build faster, better, and serve more customers. All of that is something that the product team provides that then becomes kind of foundation for a lot of the kind of other activities, go-to-market activities with those partners, as well as obviously acquiring the new partners as well.
And how widely do you share that across your partner base? Is that for like your most elite partners, you're sharing the most information and transparency, and then as you scale out, you're sharing less? Are you sharing it all the way across the board?
We actually share, like, I truly believe that the more partners know about what we're doing, the better success is going to be. So we invite all of our partners, regardless of their tiers and kind of their engagement with us, to come to the partner product roadmap, where we tell them, like, those are all the things that we're planning to work on. And those are going to be the things where you can actually participate. So that's kind of something, and we typically do it even ahead of us sharing anything with our customers, because we want our partners to be also the frontline kind of information, or parties who actually have all of this information that they can also then communicate to our mutual customers as well.
How big is your ecosystem? Like, just so that people understand.
Well, so we have, that would be something that obviously our head of partnerships would have exact numbers, but we have about 200 solution partners. So those are the companies, and we have some global solution integrators like Deloitte, Accenture. We have some kind of more regional that are focused on either North America or Europe in general. And then we have about, I think, 150 technology partners that we work with. Like, those are going to be the companies like text provider, Avalara, Vertex, payment providers, Stripe, PayPal, PayOne in Europe, and others. So, and we invite all of them kind of to always understand kind of where we're heading and kind of what is going to be the role that we envision for them.
And do you have, like, let's call it just developers out in the wild? I don't know what their exact word is for. I think somebody said indie developers. Like, I don't know if that's actually the right term for them.
Freelance developers.
Solopreneur developers?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
dev shops, yeah. Okay, I know what you're saying.
Well, that's actually, Asher, you totally touched on the point that I forgot. So yes, we also have, we're building, and we're heavily investing in building developer ecosystem. And I think for all the platform products is absolutely important, because it's one thing when you kind of work for an agency that is focused on that specific platform. But typically, and it's kind of something that, again, also not quite understood by the product people, I'm not sure about the partnership people, but kind of when you have a platform product and you kind of want different agencies to be focused on developing on top of your platform, you need to have enough developer ecosystem motion, like those indie solopreneurs, developers who are bought into your platform, who are excited to build something on top of it, and they feel like, there's no other better technology. So the more you actually have that, the higher chances are going to be that a certain agency is at the end going to choose to build on this platform, because kind of now you have this developer ecosystem that they can choose from. Like, you have those people who advocate for certain technology, because the platform product, while it's a business, it's also like a technological choice. It's a platform. It's a technology that you need to have that excitement around your product, and that needs to be also carefully built. It pretty much, like, it's impossible for that motion to be created by itself.
Yeah, totally. I would categorize it as people in small companies and people in big companies.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Elena, I have a question for you. So, in terms of when you kind of network and discuss with your peers in product leadership, do you find your point of view on this is to be common, or do you find a lot of product leaders have a hard time letting go of that control? Like, I think your openness to sharing the product roadmap, the fact that you look as partners as like needing to be a key to the table, in my experience, that's pretty unusual. And I will say, I think there's a complication to this, right? Which is you mentioned being at a platform company, and there are a lot of product leaders, even within software, that are at product companies, and they do need to integrate to platforms, but it's not the degree and pervasiveness as it is if you're at a platform company yourself. So I do think that kind of helps perhaps influence the dialogue of where people are coming from. But would love to hear your take with other product leaders. What do you feel like the general sentiment is from product leadership towards partners and building with partners?
Yeah, I think to be honest, that's kind of what actually sparked this conversation with Asher at the beginning. That I feel like that is not quite common thing. Like there are quite some successful platforms. Again, like going back to Apple, a couple of others, kind of where they have done it at scale, and somehow that is part of their DNA. But other medium-sized or scale-up kind of companies that are on that journey of becoming a platform, kind of their product leaders sometimes don't understand kind of that you actually need to be working differently, because the success of the platform product is also the ecosystem and like
Totally.
network effects around it.
Yep.
And kind of most of the time, like when I talk with somebody about this topic and people like, oh my God, like we actually were trying to understand like why it's so hard for us to drive adoption of our platform, is because we approach it as a product and we're like looking for the customer to tell us what to build, and we build it. And then there's this whole kind of like platform ecosystem that needs to be built, but it doesn't fit. And kind of like, how do you make it fit? Not clear. Kind of where to go to find some answers, not clear either. And I feel like that's kind of definitely a huge gap that is not well covered yet. But I'm curious to learn also
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what your
I'd love to
experience
get your point of view on like, so okay, of all the platform articles that I've read, right, and I talk to people, people say like, okay, it starts off as a feature, then you get to a product, then you get to a multiple product, then you get to a suite, and then you get to a platform, right? But I don't know if that's actually how the journey happens, because I feel like you may have two products and one product is actually the product that helps you become a platform. It's just because it's a workflow product and the other thing is a data product, right? So like, what would the journey be like from your point of view?
Yeah, excellent question. So I think it's to be honest, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know, because I
That's
feel like
fair.
yeah, there's some products. There's some products that start as a platform. Like for example, I had the huge honor at the beginning of my career to work for a company called Magento, and it was
Yeah,
really popular digital
yeah,
commerce
totally.
platform back then, now owned by Adobe. And so what was really, really interesting, and their founders typically talk about it. So they started as agency as well. So they were implementing like digital commerce shops for customers. And then they saw that they were like doing kind of pretty much like, the same features and functions. Like they were building a lot of custom solutions. And then at some point they were like, okay, so like we're doing all of this all the time. Why wouldn't we actually package all of that, or the common functionalities of all of that, and create a platform? But instead of creating a product that we now can sell, we will create a platform and sell a platform that would allow other people to go and kind of build a custom solution. And kind of they abandoned basically their first business and created the platform itself. And that's kind of like, so their product was a platform at the beginning because it was built for developers in mind at the beginning. I feel like some other companies, at least that I know of, like started as a product and then they tried to become a platform. But that transition is so hard because it's the mindset, the culture, the ecosystem around, but also the technical foundation of what the product is. It's so hard to change all those things at the same
Yeah.
time.
I feel like developer tools always take a back seat in a product company, and then you're like, well, we have all of our engineers focused on creating features because there's this backlog of customer requests, but then you need developer tools for people to develop
Yeah.
on your platform, and that's the piece that always isn't funded or resourced or doesn't make it on the roadmap because there's another customer feature that's waiting.
Exactly.
And I think, Asher, that's also a really good distinction in the different journeys companies can take. I think companies that were, even if they started as products, but they were selling to developers, they at least have an easier transition in that regard as building
Yeah.
up that developer ecosystem, whether it's on open source or they were just having a tool for developers. But then when you have a different persona, like say you're an email marketing platform or you're for BDRs to sell on,
If
right?
you're selling to business users, basically.
Then pivoting to a platform is much more challenging because you have a whole new
Yeah.
persona that you suddenly have to
Oh, yeah.
cater to and learn. And it's a more difficult journey. But I think to Elena's point, if you look at the tech landscape, you see companies that are platforms now that came there from a lot of different directions.
Yeah. I would say, like, just to stay on the e-commerce world, WordPress would be another. Would you consider
Yeah.
that a platform product? Because like I feel like there's a plugin for everything, and
Yeah.
and none of those things are owned by WordPress.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, WordPress is a perfect example. Like it is a platform that allowed people to build businesses on top. And again, like the developer ecosystem, which is really interesting, right? So you have your platform, and then you have all of those people that build add-ons or plugins,
Yeah.
but those are also businesses. So like it's not necessarily just a developer tooling that needs to be considered.
Totally.
To Kelly's point is also like how do you sell to those people, or how do you build a partnership motion? But also kind of what are the business models behind it? Like how can the company, WordPress in this example that doesn't build all of those different plugins, still make money in order to survive?
And I think the if we think about it, let's take HubSpot for example, right? Like start off as a product, right, and then became a suite of products, and then created this app marketplace because there were parts of the roadmap that needed to be fulfilled. So people started integrating their apps into the workflows, and then that's how they became a platform. So it's like started off with selling to a business user, and then becoming a platform that way. Versus, I feel like a lot of the companies that sell to IT specifically by nature have to be platform companies or have to provide the developer experience because there's just so many engineers in IT that just want their hand on the product and they want to figure out what they can do with it.
Yeah, I don't think they have to be a platform because they could just be a tool for developers. Like developers have tools too, but I think your point about the developer experience is that's who they're already put their investment in understanding, building community around their tool, and so the expansion into a platform is like one step over instead of three steps over.
Yeah, interesting.
I would love. So I've really seen people struggle in partnerships to have these conversations with product leaders because a lot of technology partner leaders are in organizations where the product leaders have this mentality of, we own what we ship, we love what we ship, this is what we're here for. They're passionate, which is great, right? And then they're in the position because they're the business people trying to make the business cases and they see the opportunity. But what advice would you give to them to framing the conversation specifically to a product leader, right? Like what they might say to a CFO is one conversation, what they say to the CEO. But what would resonate most with a chief product officer or a GM if you're trying to say, hey, we want to move a little bit and have a seat at the table, get more exposure to the product roadmap, give you feedback. Like, how would you advise them to frame that most effectively?
Oh yeah, Doug, that's that's $1 million question. I'm like slowly starting to think about like writing a book about that because I feel like that's exactly kind of what is not understood. But like going back to your question, so if you as a partnership person want to bring partners into the conversation and create more than just kind of like a co-selling motion, but you actually want to have partners to be part of your product as well, kind of part of that joint experience. So it kind of needs adjustments on both sides, or agreements, I guess, on both sides. So from the product perspective, the product people need to actually understand what is their framework. So in what cases are they building? In what cases are they partnering? But also maybe it's actually the case where they allow somebody, what I call open the platform, where they allow somebody to build on top, because there is when you build yourself versus somebody else builds on top of it, which is slightly different than you just integrate. And in those cases, kind of you need to understand like, okay, so if there's going to be cases where we are leaving room for somebody to integrate with us because that's not the capability that we want to have ourselves. For example, like we at Spryker would never build our own payment processor. Kind of like there is no need for us to compete with Stripe or PayPal, right? So that would be something that we would integrate with. But there is going to be certain capabilities where we would just leave room for somebody to build on top. And I think kind of for the partnership person and the product person to sit down and kind of create that framework, that philosophy of like other places kind of where the partners can be that help, can be providing that help, whether it's integrating or providing some adjacent capabilities or building on top. And then if that is clear, kind of like on a philosophical place, kind of I have this like 2x2 metrics kind of that we socialize internally. And we're like, okay, so now it does fit into something where it's not necessarily that complex to build, but it's also serving just a small percentage of our use cases. So it doesn't make sense for Spryker to build that capability internally because it's not going to be it's not needed by the majority of our customers. But if the partner offers that capability, it increases our value proposition. And then we start looking into like, okay, there is a partner that can actually do this because they have expertise. It creates a business opportunity for them. So the conversation becomes much easier. And I feel like, that's probably the framework that I would suggest to a lot of partnership people and the product people to sit down and agree upon. I'm also happy to share that as a reference, maybe in the materials that we'll post under the podcast. But I think that's kind of like a helpful mindset to get that conversation going at the beginning.
And I guess what advice would you give to product leaders, right? Or actually, let's go to product managers because I think the product leaders, by virtue of like being in some WhatsApp group, will figure it out, right? And so, but product managers, especially the ones that are coming up or have been in the business in the market for a few years, right? Like, how should they think about it? Why should they care about partners in their roadmap almost?
Well, excellent question. Many don't, because in majority of our product management books that I have read, pretty much every single one, it all starts with the customer. You have a customer tells you what they need, and then you build it. Like that's what product management is all about. There's like lots of nuances. How do you decide what to build or not? But like somebody tells you something, and then you build it. Now we're saying, well, let's not build everything. Let's actually allow the partner to come in. So how do you decide that? So first of all, I think it's important for product managers to understand that there is a role of partner kind of in extending your capabilities, whether it's integrations, whether it's building something on top, a plugin, extension, what have you. So people first need to understand that. And some understand, some don't. And then the other part would be to understand like how, if that's the case, and kind of you would actually want somebody to extend your product or your platform, what kind of experience would you be creating for them? Because it's not the same experience as you would be creating for your customers. Like there needs to be tools, there needs to be developer enablement, it needs to become self-explanatory. It also needs to be enjoyable for those partners to build because developers always have other choices. They can go and build whatever they want on the side. They don't have to build on your platform. And that's something that is, I feel like it's really important for the product managers to understand that partners actually do have a role, but that is not something that is often actually covered in the majority of the product management books, courses, approaches, and stuff like that. But
that's why you have to write the book.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I'm also curious to hear about your experience. So, like, given that both of you have so much experience in partnerships, so how do you think product managers should be thinking about it? Because that's not something that we ever discuss with people like you.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Also, we'll buy that book if you write it. So you got 2 orders already. I do think that, I think to your point though, the frameworks that have been built out don't really prominently feature in the partner. So I think that presents a challenge to partner people and to product people, even when they're kind of aligned on the high vision behind what it could be. Then going down to operationalize it at the product manager level, right? You need tooling, you need frameworks, you need a way to talk about it. So I think, for me, one way to potentially look at it, but I think it's challenging, is, product managers usually are trying to drive usage among other things, but that's usually like they want to see what they're building being used by the customers. So I think one way to potentially frame it, depending on the situation, is thinking about how, like, what are partners building that drives usage on these core products, and what might that look like, right? Because sometimes you can have great synergies. For example, think about bringing in some like unique intent data into a sales or marketing platform, and then suddenly you're sending out a ton more campaigns because your intent data is making those much more powerful. You're seeing more results.
Yeah.
So I think that's one way to insert it potentially into a conversation.
Yeah.
Let me jump in as somebody who's actually lived it. The way that, at least for me, the conversation started was
Asher, maybe you tried to have the conversation and you didn't, it didn't go well. Is that what I'm hearing?
exactly, totally. I was just like, wait a sec. The way that this actually happens, just to be transparent, is like either the sales team is not able to close the deals because there's some part of the value prop is very strong and it's been marketed, but the customer isn't fully able to realize it, right? Like right out of in the decision making process, right? Or the renewal conversation is difficult because again the product is working, but there were two, three, four, five things, like you said, wouldn't be applicable to 100% of the customers or even 80% of the customers, but they were important enough, or at some time they were important enough, but there was such a heavy backlog of like other features that needed to happen. And so in that scenario, what the partnership leader, like a partner manager cannot do this job. Like if you're expecting a partner manager to go fight with product, it's not happening. Like I'm pretty much going to tell you that, right? But then also the partnership leader like has to go in and work with the chief product officer or the CTO primarily, because the engineering is rolls up to that person, right? And really, or sit with them and like understand like the capacity of the engineering team, and their ability to like push out the features that are needed the most, and then understand like, hey, if these four things aren't core to us that we have IP against, then could we just build this out with other partners and maximize our TAM or maximize our value proposition, and then go to the scrum calls and then figure out like, is this organization going to naturally like pick up or allow for partners? And it's really like more of a capacity, and then there's the process, and then it comes to the product manager to basically say, okay, like, can you scope this out, and then can you explain the scope to our partners? And then at least from a technology perspective, that's what I found the steps to take to like really get this thing done.
That's very top down though, right? So I think that's requiring the leadership on the technology and product side. But it is also, I think, tapped into what you just said, Asher, and what Elena said earlier. It is very customer centric ultimately, right? Because what you flagged in the beginning is the salesperson is losing deals, the account manager is having trouble at renewal. So really bringing it back to the customer, because I think as Elena was saying, product people are very laser focused on the customer. Now, it can get narrow when you go down to the chain to a product manager, because they might be focused on a very particular feature that they own, and they were told, like, build out this particular widget within the interface.
This way, the specs are locked in. Nobody can change them.
One thing you can do potentially, if you can align with leadership, is to get the right questions into the process, right? So even down at every level, having the product people, when there's doing those interviews with customers, trying to understand, like, even within their feature, what might be some data that could be ingested into the platform that could be used from a partner, or some ancillary feature that could be built either on top of it or adjacent to it that's going to help it perform. So I think that kind of a process improvement can change across the org just how people are approaching it, even if you're not dictating something from the top.
Well, there's a gotcha moment, right? And then the way the gotcha moment comes up is the product managers are doing these like customer case studies, right? And like integrating with like 3 different products bubbles up to the top, and then they don't know what to do. So they just go reach out to the product team of the other company and just start figuring out how to build. And then that thing bubbles up to their leadership, and they're like, WTF, like, we never authorized this, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was no business conversation that took place, and everybody just started working on the product because, again, like, the reality is, like, engineers like to build cool stuff. And this type of stuff sometimes is much cooler than their own like the task that their leaders are telling them, right? And so they'll sit on the weekends and they'll build it out. Like, I remember when I was at Lean Data, we wanted to get an integration done, and like we got the engineering team so jazzed that like they built the whole MVP out in over the weekend. And it was taking like 3 months just to get this. So there is a little bit of a gotcha moment, which I think both product leaders need to take a look on, and also partnership leaders, where understanding the reviews of like the customer case studies or the customer calls from the product managers, just reviewing them is a very, very important thing for modern partnership leaders.
Yeah, I also like how I typically like to think about it, which I know you kind of touched on that already, is as a product leader, you need to be thinking broader than your own product, because in the majority of the cases, each product is used in combination with other products. And that's also kind of like an important thing that people don't understand sometimes, that like even if you use Slack, there's like hundreds of other things that are integrated into Slack. And that's actually what makes your experience great.
Yeah.
I know whatever that might be as a different tool, right? So as a product manager, you need to understand is like, okay, I'm responsible for this capability or this product, but kind of the whole ecosystem, how my customers are going to be using it is going to be much broader. So I kind of, when I'm doing my discovery, I need to be looking at this whole picture, and then kind of starts understanding of like, okay, I know this type of integration or this type of capability is only being used in kind of 5% out of 100. So therefore, it doesn't make sense for me to build it. But if we create some business opportunity between us and the partner, I know it's a shared value proposition, that actually might be really interesting for both sides. And therefore, we actually have this better product that is more complete for all the different personas, but not necessarily has been a burden to us, because as Kelly, you said, like all the product managers are interested in adoption, but if we have to build something that is only being used in 5% across the 5% of our customer base, product managers think that it's a failure. Well, it's not necessarily is, because I know you still want to cater to those 5% of people, but if you find kind of a more elegant way through partners, why not? And I think like, I know that's something that I know kind of we're trying to understand and kind of like explain that the product management is bigger than just your product. You need to understand everything that's happening around and find opportunities where you can engage your partners.
Well, I think the leadership case for understanding how to build with partners is actually more about the product manager's journey to become a product leader. And then I feel like they really become I'm going to say an industry like best leader after they finish the org design of their companies and the org processes, and they move into a GM role, because that's when they're actually handed a P&L. And then at that point in time, they're just not worried about, hey, can I make this product best in class, right? They're actually talking about like, how do I increase revenue and reduce costs? And then at that point in time, they have to think about other ways to efficiently grow the product and technically expand the TAM, right, with the product. And so at that point, they have to, like, I would imagine that like almost all the senior product leaders at your level who have P&L responsibility have the ability to understand how developer networks and all these things work.
Yeah, I would wish so.
That's
I don't know, Asher. What are you living in?
Yeah, exactly. We need the book.
That would be nice. Yeah. But I think like maybe after this podcast, everybody would think about that more. But like I think like that's definitely something that is not, again, like well understood. So I think it depends on the nature of the product and the previous experience, because some products are really closed out, and the traditional product management also doesn't encourage you to necessarily think broader than kind of what you have. So that's something that is, I would say, is changing, because right now the role of the partnership leaders is being more elevated with your organization and some other kind of motions that are happening in the market, which has not been necessarily the case for the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, the macro is also pushing it, right? Because people just don't have enough resources, both on the talent side and maybe in some cases on the technology side, and they have to make these calls because the customer requests aren't slowing down. So there's like one path now and to get out of the situation.
Yeah, that's true.
Elena, have you done anything with your own partners? So your own company, right, might be get this vision completely and be totally platform first. But inevitably, you're going to be potentially wanting companies to integrate with you or build on you. And they actually have a different mindset. They don't actually have bought into this vision. Have you done anything to enable your teams, to enable partners to try to get them more open, more invested, more on this ecosystem journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So we there's a couple of steps that like practical steps that I want to share of things that we have done. So then we're kind of not talking about just hypothetical and philosophical things. So the first step is again is kind of to be really clear that leaving the room for partners to enhance our functionality or like our offering is place to be. Then we also always talk to our partners and saying like, okay, so those are the capabilities that for the next 2 to 3 years we're planning to invest based on what we're seeing. But it also means that we're not planning to compete with you. So if you were to build something that is going to be kind of like additional, like if you build something that we're not building, like it doesn't mean that if we see that that is successful, we're going to jump on it immediately. So we're not going to be competition to you, which is I think is something that a lot of those partner companies are looking forward, right? Because you don't want to invest in something where the platform then took it over. So that's one. Another area where we also talk a lot about joint go-to-market motion. So if somebody would be to invest in building a certain capability on a platform, it also needs to financially make sense to them. Like from a business perspective, it needs to make sense to them. It's not just kind of, it's technically possible. So there needs to be kind of from more partnership or business perspective, like let's say if a partner A has built a certain capability for a specific niche of the market, maybe they are going to be always preferred partner to us if we have a customer in that niche. So we're saying, well, there is an opportunity, and then you as a partner are going to be the preferred one for us that we would recommend a customer because you have this capability. So that's kind of like another leverage that we have. So we're always talking about this, and that's actually what our partners like a lot, because it gives them ability to be special in a way, kind of like stand out in the crowd of all the other partners that we have. So if they brought something that is unique, and for a certain period of time, they are becoming the select partners. So just let me think about like what there is anything else. Something that a lot of the partners or a lot of the companies are doing, but we're not necessarily there yet, is kind of have some kind of more of a revenue share model also, kind of like, which is something in the way I said, like we're not doing it, but in a way we are. Maybe like there's more opportunities for how to do it, but like rev share model is definitely something that is important. So from the product side, development side, we are creating an infrastructure to be able for somebody to build on top. But from the business perspective, our partnership leaders, they are ensuring that there is a mutual financial benefit to that as well, besides just being preferred partner in a certain region. So those are kind of the things that we're doing in order to incentivize our partners, and majority of them really like kind of this go-to-market motion, being preferred ones for a certain niche or certain use case or certain market, because it allows them to stand out in a really crowded space of all the other partners as well.
How do you position partners in your role to your CEO?
How do I position
Yeah.
partner?
Like, I'm curious, like, what types of conversations do you have with your CEO about partners? Yeah, because that would actually give our audience a little bit of a clue into like, okay, here's what the CEO cares about, and here's how I or an experienced leader in the market has actually done it.
Yeah. Well, great question. So if we're thinking about so again, like, I guess like it goes back to something similar that I already shared. So if we're thinking about the product roadmap, so as a product leader in the product organization in general, so we're thinking about everything that can help us serve our customers better, existing customers, but also obviously grow the number of customers that we have. So we look at kind of the needs in general, kind of like this is what's kind of what are all the capabilities and all the needs that we need to address in order to grow our business. Then from there, kind of we go through this matrix of which are the core capabilities that are hard to implement, but also applicable to the majority of the customer base. So that is going to be something that is definitely ours. Like that is something that we're going to do ourselves. If it's something that is either kind of easier to implement and kind of like there's an infrastructure to enable partners to do it, then we would just leave it to partners. And then if there is something that is not applicable to the majority of the customers, that is going to be also kind of something that we would leave room for the partners to complement. And then kind of as every time when we discuss conversation, like when we have a conversation with the CEO, I'm just basically trying to frame this conversation in those buckets and just saying the reason why on the product roadmap we're going to be focusing on those capabilities is because it's so fundamental to our core business and it's applicable to the majority of the customers. Everything else, like, yes, we might be hearing from salespeople that type of capability is needed in a deal, but that happens only, let's say, in 5% of all the deals. I would rather have a partner who brings that over, and then if that deal if the next deal with that capability comes in, we bring that partner and we go to market together. But like, we didn't spend our resources in building something that is going to be applicable only in those cases. And that's kind of like those type of conversations that we have, that I think before we put together a framework around it was really hard because it felt always so super, like, very subjective. It's kind of like, oh, but like there is a sales deal and like that capability needs to be in there. Why is it not there? Let's go build it. So it kind of like was always really easy to go one way or another. But like that type of framework that definitely helps a lot to structure conversations about something that everybody agreed to already.
Does your CEO something anytime push back and say, okay, Elena, like we have these like 120 partners, right? What if like 30 of them go out of business, 10 of them are acquired by AWS, and now what do we do?
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely part of the conversation. I think there's definitely risks to building capability that you own is always easier because you kind of control the whole IP like it's yours. And going with a partner has a lot of risks for sure. And what if their integration or their capabilities
SLAs
not
or
great?
their
Yeah,
uptime, like I mean, I'm looking at it from your perspective, right? And thinking, okay, the partnership leader is like, hey, let's go build with partners, all this stuff, right? But like, you have to sign off on it. That person doesn't necessarily have to sign off on it. If they get it wrong, they get fired. You get it wrong, a bunch of customers leave, so
yeah, no, exactly. Like it's, I don't think that there is like a perfect answer to it either, because the risk is definitely there. So, but I think that's kind of where the role of the partnership leader is really important. And it needs to be, from my point of view, be a little bit more deeper than just a business relationship. Kind of like it needs to be there's a understanding of what is the state of the business of the partner, but also kind of be in tune with, or at least create an opportunity for the product people to stay in touch with what is happening within that partner company, right? So like
totally.
I can understand, like, are they planning to sunset this product? Because on the business perspective, the company might still be there, but if I integrate it to a certain product and that product is going to be sunset and I never heard about it because it would be hard for me to manage 200 partners and know their roadmaps, like that will be a disaster. So I think it's kind of creating those opportunities for the product people to know about important stuff, to care about more than just kind of business. But risks are like kind of everything that is partner built needs to be carefully assessed and kind of monitored on a regular basis.
This thing, I mean, it's like I feel like the ecosystem risk. Let's create a new term on this podcast, just because there aren't enough new terms, right? Is really something that came up in my conversation with my friend Jack, who works at BCG, right? And companies like that who are management consulting, they're always focused on like, hey, the durability of the company and the longevity of like the customer relationship and all these things, right? And then I started looking at like inside of an organization, who really should care about like ecosystem risk is actually the product leader, because if a go-to-market partnership doesn't work out or fails, you just cancel the agreement. If a product partnership is going to fail, you have a whole like offboarding plan, and then like all these other things that need to take place. Which then I was like, well, for sure, like if a CPO doesn't have a way to think about a product partnerships, then it's going to be difficult for them or for the partnership leader to really get product partnerships going, even though the sales team is complaining, right? So I think that one of the key takeaways from here is like actually this, to apply the framework that you're saying and really look at like the what's in it for the customer, but also how do you coach your CEO to understand both the pros and the cons of each partner or partner type, and then build it out from there.
Mm-hmm.
And Elena, you just said something really interesting, which is making sure that the product team gets that visibility and feedback loop essentially from the other teams. do you guys have a good way? Because I think you mentioned the issue of the product roadmap, which is something you'd want insight to, but I think there's other things as well. Do you guys have a good programmatic way of cycling that feedback from your org, from the partners, or is it still more ad hoc?
So I think we're doing a pretty decent job of sending our information, like our updates to our partners, but I wouldn't say that there is a scalable way how we receive information from our partners. And actually, maybe that's kind of, I was just thinking about like Crossbeam. It just crossed my mind. So the Crossbeam has like this where you can actually talk about, right, like opportunities that are between you and other partners. But also maybe there needs to be a tool like that for product managers where you can say, in my portfolio, I have this product and I have this many partners, and then they have ability to kind of inform all of their partners as well of some important changes, because all of that right now is like somebody sends an email, somebody schedules a call, somebody does something or nothing, and and that is not
No.
necessarily.
I mean, this is actually where the core development, if you want to call it, or your what would be interesting to see is like all of the partnership leaders who have product partnerships to understand their scorecard or their dashboard and see
Yeah,
like what part of their dashboard is actually like surfacing up these type of things
yeah.
versus just like go to market metrics or financial metrics,
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of like it was just based on the question, Kelly, that you asked. Like, I think like that is something that is so much needed, because like, how would you know like if something changed, if they sunset a certain API that you were relying on, and now all of a sudden your product partnership, your product integration doesn't work any longer. So that is something that I feel like there is no scalable way that exists, or at least that I'm aware of. But it would be so nice if that actually existed. Um, but I actually also learned this term, which I never knew before, Asher, from you, product partnerships.
yeah.
Kind of, so maybe that's something that you guys use in your world, but I actually never came across that. But I love it, because I think that's exactly what we're talking about. It's not all partnerships that the product people need to know, but the product partnerships,
Partnerships for sure.
that's where we need to be involved. And then it needs to be a joint venture between the product people and the partnership people.
Yeah. Well, I guess this may be the last podcast then, because we were looking for a product idea and we're going to call it Product Beam. And there we go, Kelly.
Perfect. That's
I
awesome.
just bought the URL.
Exactly.
It's good.
We didn't realize that this is what we were really using the podcast for. With some product ideas, and we should have had like 50 product leaders before, and we would have had them already.
Yeah, exactly.
Dang,
So that's why you need to have a product person on the call.
exactly. Dang it, such a long way to get to that. No, just kidding. No, but it's actually a very very good point, because there are solutions out there that are trying to work on the co-creation and the core development side of things, but it may actually just be simpler than like using a tool to, but maybe like creating some sort of scorecard or some sort of like dashboard that just and popularizing the terms that people need to need to get, like maybe partnership leaders need to get on their product leaders like dashboard and start sharing that, because the dashboard is what gets shared inside the company. And if it's not, to me, if it's not on the dashboard, it just doesn't exist from an exec.
Yeah, I agree.
Super. All right, what else would you like to tell our users, or I would say
Our users.
I'm already thinking like, okay, well, product name sounds like a cool product here. Let's go with that.
I actually have a question. So I feel like you're very bought into the ecosystem building framework. What do you find to be the biggest challenge, though, in staying aligned with partners over time?
Staying aligned with partners over time. I think all product companies, or like those partners, obviously they have their evolving strategy, right? So kind of our company evolves, their companies evolves as well, and not necessarily knowing kind of what their plans are and where they want to go is one of the biggest risks, and that is something that is a huge risk, and there's like no easy way, I guess, to mitigate that. But I think that's kind of the biggest challenge for me, that when you make a decision that you want to leave a certain capability up to a partner to cover for you, what kind of guarantees you have that that is going to be still there in a couple of years, and you would not need to urgently come up with a solution that is going to be backfiring with your customers. So that is going to be something that I would wish was solved better than kind of how it's actually handled right now.
Do you feel like that's an even bigger risk right now with AI, and companies are kind of like, it seems like on the surface, companies are scrambling to reinvent their products, right, at a rapid pace just across the market. So do you feel like that risk is right now exacerbated by the fact that we're probably seeing companies at least say that they want to like make these big changes for the customer?
Well, no, I think any technological change is introducing a huge risk. Probably like maybe not the risk, but a huge unknown, because you don't really know what exactly is going to be the direction, and also how exactly that's going to look for your partnership. So I think that is definitely a huge risk, because kind of it's hard to, like, now we're at the point where everybody needs to reinvent themselves, while before it was kind of a little bit more gradual evolution of basically the capabilities that you had. So I think right now, like, if we were talking about, like, if there was one thing for people to take away from this call, it would be like, if you're doing those product partnerships, you need to urgently sit down with all of your partners and understand what are going to be the mutual capabilities or opportunities for you now in the foreseeable future, with knowing that every single company is trying to reinvent themselves at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like, Elena, what do you need? I don't want to create more work for you, but like, I feel like you're
you have a second book idea for
exactly. I'm like, the third book, let's do a world tour, like, this thing. It'll be the product beam and the product beamers,
That would be awesome.
The thing that I was just thinking about, like, I think what would be awesome to get a point of view from you on after this podcast, and we could probably like use that in the launch materials, is product metrics that can be improved by partnerships. I think that would be really good, because then what we would be able to do is say, okay, and it's not like customer acquisition cost, because I feel like that's talked about so much. Like, we want like actual like product metrics, right? Is it days to deliver a feature, or like whatever those metrics are, right? And then we can go to the market and say, look, like, if these come up in scorecards and they are yellow or red, then here's a way for a partnership leader to go into the conversation and say, I have a way for you to turn it to green. And then they can actually help from a metrics perspective. They're already helping with like the use cases and stuff like that, I think is a natural way. But I feel like to make it real, we need a metrics point of view.
Yeah, I'll think about that. The product metrics that can be improved by partnerships, I think it's an excellent topic. Not ready to answer it right now, but I'll.
Yeah, no. That's why I was like,
that was homework for you.
Exactly. Like,
homework.
Info, but like, I don't want to create more work for you, but then I also really want the info.
Awesome. I'll get back to you once I'm done with my homework.
Yeah. I'm surprised Kelly's in saying, well, actually, you're really good at giving other people homework, So, all right, Elena, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I know, we could talk about this for hours, because like there is like the whole like app marketplace piece, and then a monetization of an app marketplace, and like coming up with the different commercial models, and also the developer models that can be. What is a premier partner from what is not a premier partner? I feel like let's start here with you. And then bring you back on in maybe like a couple of months, and then go a little bit deeper after we share these product metrics thing out, and then and then by that time we'll actually be in a world of we'll actually be post Catalyst, but we'll also be able to like take up the top 3 or top 7 questions that product leaders are facing, and then we do a session where we just like riff on those.
Yeah, awesome. I would love that. Thank you so much for having me here.
Super. Thanks, Lena. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you both. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player or YouTube. Share it with a colleague, or tell us what you thought of it on LinkedIn. See you next time.